Hello Flosstube, my name is Deb. I'm the Traveling Stocking Stitcher, and I'm really glad that you joined me here today. We've got some new faces out there. We've had this big bump in subscribers, so we're over 900 now. We're getting real close, tantalizingly close to that big 1,000 milestone. So really glad to see the new faces, and I won't say the old faces, I'll say the familiar faces. Glad to have you back if you're a returning viewer, so thanks so much. Our main topic today is going to be Pattern Keeper. I didn't think Pattern Keeper was something that I needed, and this is going to be the 10 reasons why I was wrong. I thought Pattern Keeper was, for the big full coverage, the heaven and earth designs, the massive confetti heavy projects that people do, and I don't like to do those, so I didn't think there was going to be anything out there for me. So I wanted to do this, because one thing that, this is not going to be a tutorial. I may show some things to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about here and there, but it's not intended to be a how-to. It's not going to be, it's not a paid promotional advertisement, although I will tell you how much I love it. It's something I hadn't seen out there, which is a discussion about what other things, what are all the benefits to using Pattern Keeper. And so I've come up with 10 kind of high-level categories, and there's even more than 10, but I've kind of broken them down into that, and I'll get into the specifics below that. But the reasons why Pattern Keeper has really transformed my stitching, and so you can make a decision about whether it's going to work for you or not. Now, if you're already a Pattern Keeper user and you already know, what it does, I do have at least one example you might want to stick around for, because it's something that I haven't heard anybody else talk about for a use for Pattern Keeper that I think is a real advantageous way to use it for something a little different. So normally I try to have a theme, or a prop, or wear clothes or something. I put something that has a pattern on it. Must be feeling terribly creative. But this would be a good example of something that would be easier to do in Pattern Keeper if this was a design. So I was going to wear a dunce cap, because it's the reasons why I was wrong, but I just put a dress on instead. But this is a floss tube, so before we get into the main topic, I do need to show you some stitching, because that's what you have to do. I recently went to Amsterdam. We stopped there on the way home from a tour we took of Croatia and Slovenia, and so spent a couple of days in Amsterdam. So I went and looked at some examples of things that reminded me, once I got back, of what would be good travel posters that I can make. And I've got a couple of things that I'm working on. So the first piece that I want to show you is called Dutch Village Monochrome, and it's from NARAxStitchPatterns. Now they had 3 different patterns that looked like buildings in Amsterdam, but they all had slightly different color tones, and they had a little different design of the buildings and stuff. So I kind of looked at them. The one was a patchwork that was a little too colorful for me for representing Amsterdam, which is, doesn't have that much color. And then there was one that was more browns, which that's not really my favorite kind of color collection, although there is a lot of browns in Amsterdam. But the one I decided to go with is this monochrome one, because it's got grays and purples and that kind of thing. So this seemed to be more representative of Amsterdam. Now, here's what I've got. And it's, real easy block stitching. So it's stitching up really quick. But as I got the buildings done, I started saying, well, maybe I need to start doing some back stitching, because you see there's a lot of, the windows have a lot of back stitching in them. And it calls for 2 strands of B5200 to do the back stitching. And so I tried a little bit. And you see down here in the corner, particularly this one that's got almost a balcony. It was too much for a lot of reasons. So for one, very choppy. The 2 strands made it very choppy. And it also, it made it too fussy. The buildings in Amsterdam are almost kind of, they do have decoration, but they're a little more austere. They don't have a lot of balconies, so I think that's part of the problem. They do have, this isn't as bad down here, where it's just the Actually, this is your fun fact for the day. The mullions versus muntins. So on a window, mullions are verticals only. Muntins, the things that divide the panes of glass, can be vertical or horizontal. So you can take that to a dinner party with you and be the life of the party. So, but the ones that have the muntins here, not so bad, but it's still a little thick. I wasn't really crazy about how it looked. I reached out to the wonderful stitching community on Instagram, and you people are fantastic, you know, and it's a great resource, either Facebook or Instagram. People are so generous with their help, and I got a number of suggestions for what to do. I'm going to read them off because they deserve some credit. They're not all floss tubers, so they don't get the attention they deserve sometimes. So had a number of people mention one strand instead of the two strands. Pale Fire Stitcher suggested that, along with, and she also suggested leave out a lot of the back stitching, which is the same thing that Keystone Stitcher suggested, eliminating the white or change the color. But Pale Fire Stitcher said one strand, as did Miss Shelf. I'm going to put the names down there because they're hard to pronounce the handles sometime. Kathy Cullen Stern and My 12 House Creations also recommended that, as did Stitchy Wendy. She also suggested some straight stitching, which I've done on like some of the Michael Powell stuff. I've done some straight stitching, but it's usually not as long. Some of these windows are like 6 or 8 high, and it would be long for one single stitch. But you know, because usually on the Michael Powell stuff it's black, and you think about coloring books and you see black outlines, but you don't see white outlines of things, because white's generally more of a detail thing, or you know, an accent type thing. So MJ McCarney also said long straight stitches, and possibly using sulky. More about that in a second, which I think is a great solution. And then Kay Menzies 29 suggested couching, and I said, well, you know, I've done a little bit of it. I don't know that I'm great at it. Quite honestly, I'm really good at sitting on a couch, not so much stitching, couching, you know, where you have to kind of tack it down. But she gave me some advice on how to do that. So that's a possibility as well. And so I think I will consider some of those things. Stephanie Wingett won on Flosstube, or on Instagram, .1 I think it is her handle. She suggested floche, and I've never even seen floche, not quite sure what that is. I looked it up online. Or sulky, not use the B5200, use Silky White, which I think is a fabulous solution. It's a little thicker, it's about 1.5 thick, so I think it would work well to do that. So I'm actually going to take almost everybody's suggestion. What I'm going to do is do white around the windows. That eliminates some of the back stitching instead of the gray. And then I'm going to probably do one strand in the mullions, and then maybe either sulky or 2 strands to do some of the detailing. So I'll show you what I'm talking about there. But thank you so much to everybody. This is a great community, isn't it? They're just fantastic. This is what I've done a little bit of test on here, so point out what I've done differently. So now you can see it on these windows up here. One change that I made is all the windows are using gray background. And I think it means I got to frog some stuff, but not too bad. I'm going to do all the white, the outline in the white. And so that's what it looks like. Here's one where I've done 2 strands of B5200. Here's where I've done 1 strand of B5200. I'm liking the 1 strand better, but I think sulky might be a good alternative because it's thicker. It'll give me the same look, but just not so choppy. So that seems like a good solution. Or the other option is I might stick with the 1 strand for doing the mullions, or the muntins. But then you'll see on the design, there's around some of these buildings, there is more detail. So maybe using the sulky for that, because that will stand up better too, especially like on this lighter gray building. I think that will stand up a little bit better than a single strand. And then interior, right over the maroon kind of, those are all 154, the windows. I think maybe the small one to do the muntins might work out well. By the way, this is on 18 count white, and I can tell you, because I have Pattern Keeper, that I am 31.63% done. That's not true. I did a little stitching on there earlier today that I didn't fill in yet. But So the next Amsterdam piece that I have is, when I saw this right away, it really reminded me of the John Clayton designs that I have done. This one is an anchor kit, and I do kind of like the really, kind of photorealistic ones, and this looks very realistic to me. As a matter of fact, this looks very much like where we stayed. But the John Clayton ones, I thought, well, I could, put those in a same kind of frame. It's slightly different. This is like 5.5 by 12.5, and the John Claytons are 4.5 by 12.25, I think it is. So I would either have to make them a little wider, or even if I did them on a different size fabric, it would be a little bit wider, but not too long. So I decided to do it as is. It's a kit, comes with some blue fabric. It's on 16 count, and this is what we've got going on so far. Now this is a paper copy, and I haven't put this into Pattern Keeper, so I'm doing this the old-fashioned way. And boy, once you start using Pattern Keeper, you get really spoiled. You can see the way I stitch, I'm kind of all over the place on Confetti. This is all the water stuff here, so I'm not real good about following the 10 by 10 block kind of deal. But Pattern Keeper has helped me with that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is what I've got going on. It is on a paper copy. Pattern Keeper does have an experimental version of loading in photos, and I tried a little bit half-heartedly. I didn't take a real good picture. It probably would work better if you scanned it, but I just old-schooled it and I'm using the paper. It's not a real huge design, so, but I can't tell you what my percentage is. And then the last piece of stitching I have to show you before we get into the topic at hand is Portuguese orange tree tiles. This is by the Vivsters, and it's on an 18 count white Ada, and I am at 58.85%. Now here it is. Oh, some repetitive stitching around the edges. Going around here, but not too bad. Getting there. Alright, so let's get talking about Pattern Keeper. Now, what is Pattern Keeper? It is a markup app for PDFs, basically, to keep track of your stitching. It's so much more than that, but that's basically the concept. So I did a little research on their website, and it was designed in 2019 by Asa Fallenjack, who is not only a software developer, but also a stitcher who lives in a little town in Sweden called Mjölby. And so being a stitcher, they know the pitfalls, they know the things, so they know what can be beneficial. So I think that helps that the person knows stitching. And there is, people talk about Markup XP, and there's other tools out there. Markup XP tends to be for Apple, is my understanding, versus Pattern Keeper, which is for Android. Now, if you're an Apple user, do you need to go out and buy an Android device to be able to use it? I'm guessing Markup XP can do some of the same stuff as well, so this probably would apply. And it sounds like they are in process of developing an iOS version for Pattern Keeper as well, so stay tuned if you're a devoted Apple user. The number one on my list of reasons I didn't think I needed Pattern Keeper is speed. Now, why I didn't think I wanted to stitch quickly, don't know. I found that it has improved my speed. I almost tried to do a test, tried to think of, well, maybe I could do a little 10 by 10 square example that has a lot of color changes and see what the difference is between using Pattern Keeper and not doing that. I couldn't find a real good example to do before this, but I may give you an update on that in the future if I come up with a good example, because I would really like to quantify how fast you can go and what difference it makes. And the reason that's important is we're all familiar with the Sable concept, the stash acquisition beyond life expectancy. So if I'm going to get a jump at all on this stash, I got to find ways to stitch faster, because otherwise it just keeps growing and I can't keep up. But I figure out, if I can do 2 or 3, good-sized pieces a year more than what I was doing, that's a real win for me. Essentially, I'm a cross-country stitcher, which means you kind of use one color and stitch all over, but I just kind of whatever, I feel like I'm in a blue mood or I'm in a green mood. So I pick a color and I kind of stitch it. That's kind of how I do it. I'm not real organized about that kind of stuff. But it's real easy to find the stitches of a certain color, even a single stray stitch, so you can get everything in there. You don't have to go back and do stuff that you missed because you didn't see them. So all your unstitched areas of that one color you have selected are highlighted for you so you can see what's in the vicinity and stitch all of those at once. Picking up a whip if you have gone away for a while and come back. I'm not somebody who does any tracking, so I just have this paper copy or even a PDF copy that has no markings on it. So I spend a lot of time, well, where was I and what things have I stitched, what have I not stitched, and it gets really tricky to try to figure out where you've been. And I pick it up and it's got everything marked that's been done, and I pick the color that I want to use and it shows me the things that haven't been done. So it's amazing how much time that saves you from just the figuring out where you are and where to start next. So the way that I stitch is I typically highlight the row that I'm going to stitch, and so it makes it easier to count. I'm really not a big 10 by 10 grid person, a lot of times because you can't really see them that well. Pattern Keeper enhances those grids, so they're very, very bold and easy to see, and so it helps considerably. And what I actually do is you click the area, the color you want to use, and then I highlight before I stitch them. I highlight the row or the group that I want to stitch. It makes it easier to count. It makes my eye draw to that space. So you highlight it and you can see that, okay, it spans 2.5, 10 squares, so that must be 25 stitches. Okay, so that's much easier to count. I actually did look on the website, and there are enhancement requests that they have listed. People can submit enhancement requests, and there was already one in there to show how many stitches you have highlighted. So this would be nice. I wouldn't even have to look at the 10 by 10. I could just highlight the ones I'm going to stitch before I even do the first leg, and it could show you potentially the number of stitches. It doesn't do that yet, but maybe sometime in the future if you go and vote for it. But then I'm able to stitch those, and then when I'm done stitching the area I want to do, I hit that little button and my stitch count has gone up, or what percentage has gone up. So that's very fun. Next thing up is accuracy, and there's a number of ways that I find that it helps me with accuracy. For one thing, page breaks. Page breaks are always a nightmare. If you're using a paper copy, you finish this page and you need to figure out where you're going to go to the next one. Well, I got to backtrack a little bit and find the other page, and then I got to make sure that I've got the right line, because if you get off one or two, especially if they don't have the overlapping columns, which finding where your next stitch is, if you get off on there, it's really hard. But one thing that Pattern Keeper does that's fantastic is it renders the chart as one whole chart. You can still see the page breaks where they are if you want to. You can turn that off if you don't want to, but I can still see where my page breaks are. And so I don't have to worry about that transition. There is no gray areas that I have to worry about. I don't have to go back 3 pages and find where it was and kind of compare it to the page that I was just on. Figure out which color it was. Is it down 3 and over 2? Done. Don't have to worry about that anymore. Or if you're doing a PDF, I don't have to scroll through the different pages and find the other one and scroll back up to figure out where I left off. So no more page breaks. Right there, worth the price of admission as far as I'm concerned. Did I mention it's about $8.49 USD, and there's a 30-day trial period. Now, for me, it was like a 30-minute trial period, because as soon as I started using it, I thought, there's no way I'm not buying this. And also, there's not any premium content, so when you're using the trial period, you're using the full functionality, and it's not going to be like you get extra stuff when you order it. So you get a real trial of what it's going to be like. One of the other things that I find helpful is kind of triangulation, because I can see what stitches were done and roughly the color, because they show the color representation. I can tell. I've got an example here of one that this is the piece that sent me to Pattern Keeper, because I was doing this is a Ireland TWA poster, and I showed this before. I talked about how the fact that what's behind here, that it was driving me to distraction the confetti. You can see here that all this confetti down here, they're all beiges and grays and very similar colors, but there are some darker colors. So when you are actually looking at a piece, and I can see what's already been done, and I can see that it's like one of these darker colors, I can say, okay, well, I see I put these rows in here of the gray, so now I know where I can put these lighter colors in relation to that. So, you know, I feel much more confident that I'm not going to get way out of whack. Ordinarily, I wouldn't have been able to go up this far and do some random cross-country stitching. I would have had to keep everything contained to make sure my my checks and balances were in place, that I wasn't not going rogue and ending up way off where I have to frog all this stuff out. So, much more confident when I put my stitches is that they are where they're going to go, because I can see what's already been done. And, you know, if you're a highlighter, unless you're highlighting with a bunch of different colors, which I've never done because it seems like more tedious than the stitching itself, like you're doing the thing twice, you're marking each thing, you don't really get the color representation that this was a gray color versus a blue color or versus a beige color or what have you. So, and if you do go wrong, it's quicker to detect, so you're not making a bunch of stitching that you're going to have to take a bunch out. So this goes kind of hand in hand with speed, because the more accurate you are, the less frogging you have to do. And the less frogging, the more stitching you're going to do. So, you know, you don't have to stitch stuff twice. So this is another way that this really could have been considered a speed benefit. No missing stitches. Like I said, you see everything. I can see everything in the vicinity, so I don't have to go back and do, oh, I missed this one little stitch here. As long as I'm here, it's real easy for me to see it highlighted. I can stitch it while I'm there and don't have to go back and do a lot of onesie-twosies later on. My next one is, I wasn't quite sure how to label this category, but I decided to call it Nuisance Reduction, because it's the little irritating things that you have to put up with that Pattern Keeper just does away with. They go away. You don't have to worry about them. I talked about page breaks before. Page break is one of them. Because you have this whole design out in front of you, you don't have to go back and forth. This was really the biggest time waster and biggest potential for errors for me. In addition to page breaks, the other thing that you can do is you can do continuous stitching. You know how you get those ridges? You do the page break, and at the end when you come back, when you're stitching horizontally, it always seems to kind of leave a ridge. Now I know that Sarah, Stitching Mommy, has recommended doing the typewriter method, where you stitch one color all the way along one row, and then you get down to the next one. You just keep going row after row. Because there's no page breaks, because you have the whole chart rendered in front of you, you can do that left to right. So it makes that easier to do as well. So fantastic for that. Center start, if you're a center starter, you can have that little center thing show right in the middle, so you don't have to trace down and over the side and figure out where your center is. Done for you. Another one is the thing that I like to call keyless entry. Just like when you go to your car, you don't have to dig around in your purse for your key. You don't have to use a key anymore. Yeah, you don't have to use a key at all. Because again, similar with the page breaks, I found myself having to either go back in my PDF somewhere and lose my place in my chart, or sometimes I would take a copy of the key so I could, at least go over to the key, look at the key, find out what I wanted to use, and then go back to the chart, but still have to switch back and forth between apps. Not having a key is probably the speediest thing. And that's kind of why I wanted to do a test, because I think this is where you'd really pick up your fast stitching. Because you think about it. You're going to stitch something, so you have to go find your key, and you have to go look and see what the symbol is. And then you have to figure out what the color is, your number, then you have to go over and get your color, and then you have to go back to your chart and find your spot, and then start stitching. Now, I click the box that I want to start stitching in. I don't even care what the symbol is. That's right, you don't even care what the symbol is. Because this is my other pet peeve. Designers who apparently the printers tell them, well, you get 10 symbols and after that you're going to have to pay extra or something. I don't know. There must be some sort of sliding scale, because it seems like, it's like, okay, well, let's do a forward slash. Okay, let's do a backward slash. Let's do a big circle. Let's do a little smaller circle. If you have even the slightest touch of dyslexia, it makes it really hard to do. Not having to know what the symbols are is a game changer as far as I'm concerned. Because what you do is you click on the box you want to stitch, and yeah, it happens to have whatever symbol in there, but it shows me right at the bottom of the page what the color is. It shows me the picture, the representation of the actual color itself, the number, the number of the thread that you're using, and shows me how many stitches that I have. Eliminates errors. Again, here's your accuracy thing, because was it an 898 or was it 989? They kind of look similar, but it's a little different brown, so you can tell the difference, and so you can stitch with the right thread without messing it up. So that right there is really a fantastic feature, a game changer as far as I'm concerned. And then one of the other nuisances, again, like I said, I'm not somebody who does highlighting, but because I don't trust myself with ink around my stuff. So, but it eliminates the possibility for highlighter mishaps because you're doing it right in the app. You don't have to worry about getting your little piece of paper and stuff and marking it on there. My next category then would be motivation. And I actually kind of thought that the having check off things, like since I've never used a marker or anything on paper, that I thought checking it out would be a pain in the neck. But you could do the little dopamine hit every time you push that button and you see that percentage increase that you've done more stitches. So that is kind of fun. So motivationally it is fun to do. So you're going along, you're doing your stitching, and you hit the little check mark button as you completed things, and the little numbers are starting to go up. So you're like the little rat hitting the bar and getting the pellet to come out. It's motivating. And so it shows you your number of stitches per day, the stitches that you have complete total, and then the total percentage that you have complete. And it doesn't carry over from day to day, it doesn't keep history, so you do, if you want to kind of track your progress over time. I have a little spreadsheet set up that I've got some formulas based in there that I plug those 3 numbers in at the end of the day, and it calculates some things that I'm interested in seeing. So it is kind of fun to do little competitions with yourself. It's also useful to know how much that you stitch. And I find it varies from project to project. Some things that are, this Amsterdam piece with the big blocks of color goes a whole lot faster than this thing with all the confetti. And then you can also sort the floss numbers either numerically, so you can find your floss easier if you don't have a lot. You can sort it by the number of incomplete stitches, so it shows you for each color you have how many stitches in this do I have. The stitch count per color will reduce as you stitch. So say you started out with 700 stitches of that particular color. As you stitch down, your goal is to get that to 0, and so I'm done with that floss. So that's a fun thing to do. You've probably seen people on Instagram talking about how they get 3 zeros today. That means that they've finished that particular thread. Next, kind of far down the list, more than I thought, is confetti. Now, this is kind of the gateway drug for pattern keepers. This is how I got started. I was doing this piece and decided it was too complicated to do. And you can't avoid color changes or confetti somewhere along the line. So for the pieces of things that you need to do, it's invaluable. It's just absolutely a lifesaver for keeping track of things. Here's an example of what I used to do. Now I don't mention that I may mention that I don't trust myself around highlighters and ink. And even if you do you use multiple colors? You don't, because you have one. But I use pencil, and this is kind of the mess I made. Well, even if you make a mistake with the pencils, and what is it about erasers? Is it just me, or does erasers not erase anymore? It seems like they make big smudges. When I was a kid, stuff used to erase. This is what it looks like. So if you make a mistake, certainly with highlighters, it's much harder to correct something like that. I don't know how you would do that. But, this, I have Pattern Keeper. Not doing that again. Next thing, planning and kitting. I found this to be very helpful for this as well. So your stitch count is based on the actual stitches, the number of symbols in a chart. So if there's some blank canvas that you're not stitching, fabric, it's a much more accurate count. So when you're thinking, how long is it going to take me to do this, you can not have, if you just take the number of stitches wide by the number of stitches long and calculate the area, it's not always the same amount of stitching that you're expecting to do. So that can be less daunting, and you can plan better on how long it's going to take you to do a project. I might even encourage you to pick up a project that says, oh, you know, that's not so bad because there's a lot of this negative space that I don't have to stitch. I also keep, I have a spreadsheet that I keep all kinds of stitching information about patterns and stuff, and for each pattern I do keep the pattern keeper stitch count as well as what the area would be in my spreadsheet. So it kind of helps me say, oh, well, this is not too bad a thing. I might do this one because it doesn't seem to have as many as I thought. One thing that I do is if I am stitching where I'm going to use let the fabric do a lot of the thing, I'm not going to stitch maybe the sky because it's all the same color. Got an example of one where I went and highlighted all the sky, and kind of a time saver feature. They have some things where you can check off by a whole page that you've completed a certain color, or you can check off by 10 by 10 square that you've completed a certain color in that thing. So there's some time savers for checking things off as well. I've used that, and I've eliminated 6,000 stitches on this one design that I don't have to stitch because I'm not going to stitch in the blue of the sky. I'll just use blue fabric. So that took me down from 18,000 stitches to 12,000 stitches on a pattern. So it really encouraged me, oh yeah, I think I'll do that. Maybe you're trying to stitch something for a gift, or maybe you've got a retreat coming up and you're trying to figure out if you can get it done, or maybe you got a floss tube coming up that has a certain theme and you want to get things stitched by then. Can I get this done? So again, using my spreadsheet, I can divide the number of stitches by day, and because it varies by project, certain projects take longer than others depending on how futzy they are. I can say, okay, it looks like I'm averaging 3% a day, or 1% a day, or whatever, or however many stitches per day. I can take that and say, okay, based on the number of stitches I'm averaging, how many days is it going to take me to complete this? So it helps you to doing that kind of estimations as well. The other thing is for kitting. If I can pull up a list of what's, I talked about the number of stitches left for each thing, or even before I start stitching it, I can pull it up and say, ooh, this has got 6,000 stitches of 310. I better go pick up a few more skeins because I'm worried about die count, die lots or whatever. So right up front it can help you, and it can also help you say, oh, I better make a Michael's run because I'm not going to be able to finish this, and I want to be able to finish this off today. So planning and kitting, more help than I thought it was going to be. Accessibility and usability is my next category. So the readability alone, you can make it bigger, like you can do it on a PDF, but you can't do that on a piece of paper copy. To make it larger, which is just a huge improvement thing to make things, blow things up. It's intuitive, I find. I didn't need to even look at a video or anything. There's just a few buttons. It's very stripped down, minimalistic. You don't need a lot of buttons to do what you need to do. There's a positioning button where you move it around the chart. There's a searching for the color where you can highlight all the color, the stitches for that color, and then you actually hit another button when you want to do the selecting a color. So those are your three main stitches, and then there's the OK button at the bottom. So those are the only things you really need to know. Now there's all kinds of settings and parameters that you can modify for your own experience, but for accessibility and usability, I thought it's very, very intuitive. Pattern Keeper also has a Facebook group. It's a great place for support and advice and troubleshooting. They also, every once in a while, they say, oh, send us a screenshot, blow the image up big so you can't make out the chart, but so people submit, and it's kind of fun to see what people are doing and what their progress is. So it's fun to share that way as well. They also have a website with lots of FAQs and tutorial videos, and like I mentioned, the enhancement requests. Great support as well for Pattern Keeper. Portability is another category that I wasn't, I stitch using my phone. I don't even use a tablet, and I always have my phone with me. Trust me, never go to the bathroom. I have my phone with me. So, easy to stitch away from home because I've always got it. You don't need internet access, so if you're somewhere where if you're out watching your kid's baseball game, or you're on an airplane and they want you to put it in airplane mode, maybe you want to do that anyway because you want to cut down on battery use or data usage. It's all local to the device, so you don't have to worry about that. If you are going to use it on multiple devices, there is an import and export things so you can sync things. So it also is not saved to the cloud. So if you were to have your phone stolen or your tablet stolen or lose it or something, or it breaks, it won't be backed up anywhere. So just be aware of the fact that you may want to do the import-export stuff on occasion. And then one thing that I've not seen other people use before is color conversions. I had a design from the Vivsters called Mosaic Tile Textile Squares. And this is what it looked like. And I wanted to make it reminiscent of a trip to Portugal, where they have the colors are blue and white and yellow typically, that the tile colors are. And I thought, well, what if I just, instead of putting in the color for the number, I switch it to a different color. And so I could play around with it a little bit, and this is what it ended up looking like. So color conversion, you can play around with it a little bit and see different colors. And maybe I just want to change one thing. Maybe I'm doing a fancy lady and I just want to change the dress color. But maybe the background, I want to keep the colors the same. You can load the chart in 2 different times, and I can change the color and do the dress part in one color, and then I just go over to the other chart and do the other part where the other things are. So it's one way you can get around using the same color, but it's only switching it in a certain place. And it supports a number of different brands of floss. It does DMC and Anchor, Sullivan's, Madeira, Pattern Mayan, and you can also do custom ones. Custom colors, you can choose your own color and intensity. So if you are using a fancy floss that's not part of the group of choices, you can choose your own color and intensity. It might not be the exact same color, but you can get it in the ballpark to see, is this what it's kind of look like. Also supports blends, so you can put 2 different numbers in there. It will show you kind of the 2 color representation. And then the 10th thing, the reason I was so wrong about not needing Pattern Keeper, is it's fun. The enjoyment factor. I enjoy my stitching more. And at first I almost felt like I was cheating, but it really, when I'm not using it, I miss it. And it's fun to kind of see the picture come to life. And just like it does on the fabric, you see it, the representation of it come into form. So you can visually see a progress. So that's really fun to kind of do. So those are my top 10 reasons. There are some other considerations and some drawbacks or caveats that I will talk about as well. So some other considerations, there are parking features. I can't speak to that because I don't use parking. I don't like having the stray threads all over the place, so you're going to have to experiment for that yourself. But you can park if you use Pattern Keeper. It also supports diagonal lines. Again, not something I do. Your mileage may vary. Configurable. Like I said, there are a lot of settings for how you want things to display, so it's very customizable for your preferences. Some of the drawbacks you want to be aware of. It doesn't support fractal stitches. I was not aware of this when I started stitching the first pattern. Luckily, it didn't matter too much. I was doing the toucans and the Guinness poster, and they didn't have to be that specific. I actually ended up not doing the fractional stitches. But if you're doing something where it matters, keep a very close eye to your pattern. Otherwise, you might be disappointed because it doesn't really display, and you don't know that it doesn't display necessarily. Backstitching does not display as well either. You can usually pick that up on your own. You can probably still do the Pattern Keeper, but then do the backstitching off of your paper copy or your PDF or whatever. Specialty stitches, again, not supported. You could probably do like a chatelaine for tracking purposes. Yes, I did this particular area, but it would be hard to show road stitches or what have you that are on there. No, I've not really done beading or metallic, so I'm not totally sure how that would handle. But certainly the beads have a symbol, and when you do it, you check it off. So in the metallics, same thing. You just have to kind of work on that color coding kind of thing. Talked a little bit about PDF. Not all PDFs are supported. Most of them you get in. Sometimes it gets a little fiddly if they're not supported. I talked a little bit about the photos. You can load a photo, and I've done a little bit with that, but not a lot. I think it'd be better using a scanned photo versus taking one, because it gets kind of skewed and that kind of stuff. So if you actually had a flat scanned photo, it might work a little bit better. Loading, again, it's not a tutorial. I'm not going to talk a lot about how to load stuff in, other than the fact you can do most of them load pretty easily that are supported. Occasionally you have to use a little bit of brute force. You know, maybe you have to manually put in the number of the thread numbers themselves. It loads in all the symbols, but then you just have to go over to your chart and say, okay, this particular symbol is 453 or whatever. When you are doing your loading, sometimes they'll have charts that are, you know, they'll have the full color chart, they'll have the color chart with symbols, the color chart without symbols, they'll have a black and white chart. Really, a black and white chart is the best one, so if there's like 4 different versions of the chart, just go in and delete the ones that are not the black and white one. And just load the black and white one up, and that seems to work better because the colors fill in as you complete your design. I mentioned it doesn't keep statistic history, so you know it only keeps it for the current day. So if you forget, you know, you can maybe subtract from yesterday's, or people have talked about, you know, resetting your date on your phone or your computer or whatever. But you can calculate the other things that you need to keep track of in a spreadsheet just as easily. And then I would also kind of just review my original chart carefully to see what things might have been missed. So, you know, just don't do what I did the first time out, is just load it and then start stitching and hope everything's there. So just kind of eyeball your chart and make sure that you don't have any surprises. So my seal of approval, I guess this time like I said, I haven't seen anybody go through a discussion of all the features that are out there on Pattern Keeper, but Pattern Keeper itself has some YouTube tutorial videos. I did look at the one for photo loading, so I'll have a link in the description box for that, so if you want to take a look at their stuff, I'd recommend that you go there. And of course a lot of people have videos on how to upload charts and those kind of things out there as well. And then thank you, Judy, CityStitcher, in her latest video, number 165, she shouted me out, so I really appreciate that, Judy. She was talking about making changes, and you know I like to customize things and those sorts of things a lot. So she was doing a whole video on Jeanette Douglas's O Canada sampler, and how her whole thought process about how she decided to move things around to make it more symmetrical. She designed a motif to go in there, and she changed color palettes and found some other designs by Jeanette Douglas to replace things that she wasn't as fond of. So she did a beautiful job. It's a lovely sampler. I think I might do it for a travel poster sample as well, although she's found some Canadian travel posters, some vintage Canadian travel posters that she can send me links to as well, she said. So I'm looking forward to seeing those. But I tell you, this O Canada sampler is just beautiful. You got to go see it. So like I do with anybody who shouts me out, at the end of the video there's always a shout out playlist. So Judy should be on there, and you can click and watch her video because you need to go see this O Canada sampler. I'm not kidding. Go look at it. And she's been extremely generous in her support of my channel. So thank you so much, Judy. I really appreciate it. Go, go, go. Watch Judy. So that's all I have for today. I appreciate you joining me today. I hope this was helpful for those of you who are on the fence about how to use Pattern Keeper or what it might do for you, how it's going to improve your stitching. I think it will. And for those of you who have always been using it, maybe you've got some ideas of ways that you could use it that you didn't know before. Well, thank you for stopping by today. As always, if you would like to if you enjoyed what you saw, you can hit the like button. If you know somebody that is on the fence about using Pattern Keeper, maybe you use it and you like it and you're trying to convince them, maybe this would help them as well. So feel free to share. If you'd like to subscribe, if you're not already a subscriber, go ahead and do that. And comments are great. So if you've got some tips that I didn't think of that you want to mention, and I can share them in a future video. So thank you so much. Thanks for everybody who gave me the great advice on Instagram, and we'll see you again later. Bye.